Hey everybody, this is Peyton from 4x4 USA on YouTube, and this is another episode of 4x4 Chronicles. In the previous episode, we talked about buying your first 4x4 rig and what to look for. Also, what you need to take. So, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the next steps. So, let's jump right in. First question is, what is the next step after I have purchased my 4x4? A lot of young guys are thinking big tires. And let me give you a hint. That is not the answer. Nope. When you first buy your 4x4, I have a checklist that I go through to make sure that this 4x4 is going to last me until I can start rebuilding it. So I go through this checklist, and the first thing on the checklist is make it run good. We talked about buying an older piece of equipment, older 4x4. Maybe it doesn't run very good, maybe it sputters. So we need to get it to run good. So what do I look for? First thing I'm looking at, spark plugs and wires. I always go with something cheap. Spark plugs and wires, it's the cheapest thing you can do. The next thing that I'm going for is the ignition coil. If spark plugs and wires are not the option, I would go, or the problem, I would go with a coil. Maybe you're not getting spark. The next thing is a distributor. Maybe your timing is off. Maybe your distributor is no longer functioning properly. Just start going down the list of this stuff. Cap and rotor. Maybe it's your cap and rotor. They get worn out. It's inevitable. That thing zings around a gazillion times. It just wears out. Parts wear out. Another thing, air cleaner. I check my air cleaner. If you're not getting air, you're not gonna have your motor running. So check your air cleaner. It's super cheap. The next thing is a fuel filter and the fuel pump. If you're not getting fuel, you're not going to have a running vehicle. So I always think of the pyramid of a motor, right? So it needs air, that's at the top. It needs fuel, and then it needs spark. Without air, it won't run. Without fuel, there's nothing to ignite. Without spark, you can't ignite it. So do those easy, basic steps first. Get it running good. The next thing that I'm looking for is things that will make me crash. And you're thinking, what? Why would I buy a vehicle that is going to make me crash? It happens. There are things you need to check before you go wheeling, because if you don't check them, they potentially could make you crash. First thing, your wheel bearings. Wheel bearings are super easy to check. All you do is you jack up one tire and you take some sort of pry bar or a piece of wood, anything with a little bit of sturdiness behind it that you can put some force on it. You're gonna jack up your tire, you're gonna stick it in your wheel, and you're gonna see if there's play, if this is your wheel, right? If there's any play like this, that's a good indication that your wheel bearings are bad. It's important if your wheel bearings go bad, not only could your wheel fall off, it could also catch on fire. If your wheel bearings are bad, more than likely there's no grease. Now you have metal on metal contact. It's a fire hazard. Check your wheel bearings. It takes 10 seconds to jack up your vehicle and check your wheel bearings. You might as well just change your wheel bearings anyways, because as soon as you put on bigger tires, those old wheel bearings are going to go bad first. The next thing I check, tie rod ends, ball joints. Anything that has a ball style joint, I'm checking it. Ball joints, again, can also make you lose the whole hub of your vehicle. So check your ball joints. Your tie rod ends, same deal. They'll get loose. You'll have sloppy steering. This will fix a lot of your sloppy steering problems. So check it. And again, it's pretty easy. Jack up the front of your car. Turn your wheel, or have a friend or your dad or your mom hop in there and you lay underneath. Have them turn the wheel slowly and see if there's any play in those ball joints. Those are things that can make you crash. Another thing that I always change when I buy a vehicle, they're like $20 a piece. U-joints. A drive shaft at 60 miles an hour is like a catapult. Just change them. It takes maybe an hour to change all of your U-joints in your rear drive shaft and in your front drive shaft. Just do it, because you never know. Maybe there's no slack in it yet, but you put a little torque on it and the little roller bearings inside there possibly could go bad. And now you are literally gonna, like a rolling catapult. That's what a vehicle is that has bad U-joints. Just change them. Takes maybe an hour. And then brakes. You might be like, well, all this stuff is good, but can you stop? First thing I always do when I buy a new 4x4 is I change the brakes. I want to stop, especially if I'm wheeling hard and say I'm going downhill, or I don't know, anything. If you heat up your brakes and then you go through water, they're old, you also could crack your brakes, and now you're like toast in the middle of the backwoods. Yes, you're like, well, I want to upgrade my brakes, I just don't have the money for it. I understand, but your life is on the line when you are driving something that has potentially bad brakes. At least get some eyes on it. Check your pads, check your rotors, and see if you need to replace them right away, or just do it anyways. It will save your life in the end. Back to U-joints and ball joints and tie rod ends. I prefer getting greasable ball joints and U-joints. They'll have a little grease zerk on them. I highly encourage you to do that. I think those factory ones that don't have greasable ball joints or U-joints, they wear out faster, especially when you're driving two tracks. 4x4ing is very hard on parts. So if you can keep good maintenance on your vehicle by just greasing them every so often, you will, in my experience, my U-joints and ball joints last about 2 times longer, because you're pushing out all of that old dirt and all that old grease, and it saves you money in the long run, to be honest with you. So get greasable U-joints and ball joints. The next step that I do, fluid swap. That's my next big thing. And again, all these things are relatively cheap to save your vehicle and potentially save yourself. So fluid swap, first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna change the oil. I want clean oil. I wanna know that I have clean oil and a clean filter running my vehicle. I don't care what Billy Bob says when I bought the vehicle from him, because people lie when they sell usually beat up 4x4s to younger people. They do, and it's a sad thing to say, but they do. So change your oil. Figure out what kind of oil you need and cycle it through. You would feel really bad if you started to go and drive and then all of a sudden your low oil sensor came on and you didn't have any oil. Now your motor is fried. It's very simple. Change your oil. Transfer case fluids. This is a big one. Transfer case fluids. 80-90 weight for older models. This stuff is very cheap. It's about $12 to $15 per bottle. It takes about 2 bottles, I think that's 2 liters of fluid to fill most transfer cases. Again, read your manual for your vehicles, but ultimately get new 80-90 weight in your transfer case. And I'll tell you why. That transfer case, you're putting a lot of load on it, and gears, they start to shave a little bit of metal off, and now that's in your 80-90 weight and it's churning around and it's getting in your bearings. Just change it. You can drain it and then put fresh 80-90 weight in it, and you will know for sure that your transfer case is good. This is also something to get your fingers down in there too, or your drain plug will probably have a magnet on it, and you will be able to see if you have any chipped teeth, if the shards are too big. A little bit of glitter is okay. A lot of bit of glitter or chunks is not okay, and then you can assess from there. Is this still drivable? Do I have to rebuild this transfer case before I can go out and about? But at least you would know so you didn't get stuck on the trail. Next thing, diff fluid. It's the same fluid that you can put in your transfer case, 80-90 weight. And this is the same thing. You got a lot of gears running against each other. This, again, the glitter is okay. Big glitter, not okay. And you can see the difference when you put new 80-90 weight into differentials and transfer cases. 1, the clatter will go away because it's not as used, and 2, things will just move smoother. It's easier to change $24 worth of fluid than it is to change a whole pinion gear because that glitter fluid got into your bearings. So go and get fresh oil for your transfer case and your pumpkins for your differentials. And the last thing is antifreeze, coolant, and a thermostat. You are going to be putting a lot of pressure and heat into your radiator by running in 4 low at 3,000 to 5,000 RPM, trying to climb things, engine braking down hills. You're going to be putting a lot of heat through that through your radiator. That's what I was trying to say. Through your radiator. So make sure that you've changed the radiator fluid to the appropriate fluid. Again, this is like $25. And let me give you a hint. Don't go and buy the 50/50 stuff. It's a scam and a half. Go and get full concentrate antifreeze. If you're on an older vehicle, it's probably more than likely green. Go and get full concentrate antifreeze. Pour that directly, after you've drained everything, pour that directly into your radiator. The next thing you're gonna do, get a garden hose, fill that bad boy up, put that in there. Now you got 50/50 mix. Your second bottle that you've bought, you're gonna split in between the first bottle and the second bottle. And you're gonna fill them both up. Now again, you got 50/50 and top it off. You will have extra to keep with you, and keep that with you because as time goes on, the bubbles will make its way to the highest point, which is in your radiator most of the time, and you'll need to start topping that off. Make sure your coolant reservoir is at the appropriate level also. While your coolant reservoir is empty, check to make sure there's no junk in the bottom of that. You don't want that stuff circulating into your engine, because then it gets jammed up inside there and then the water doesn't flow as well. So please go in and check your reservoir before that. Again, this is a very easy thing. It's just time consuming, but it's very easy to save you thousands of dollars. The next big thing that I like to check, in fact, this is probably my least favorite thing that I like to check, but it has to be done. The full electrical system. I call this the fire hazard. People like to splice wires, and it's sad to say, people like they just like to cut wires and put wires together, and then it becomes a fire hazard. You've just spent a couple $1,000s on a vehicle. I know you want to just be bah-hahing around, showing your buddies the new whip, and all of a sudden your vehicle catches on fire because Billy Bob Joe put wire nuts on something and now it arced over and your vehicle's on fire. Hopefully you have a fire extinguisher like we talked about in the previous episode, but sometimes you don't. So check your electrical system. Where I like to check: dash, under the hood, and near the taillights. These are the three most common areas. You're like, well, that's the whole truck. It is the whole truck. Usually people don't splice wires into headlights. I don't know why. They just don't. But under the hood they do, and under the dash they do, and near the taillights they do. So those are the three areas that I like to check. Now, what am I looking for? I'm looking for any loose wires. I'm talking bare wires, maybe wires that have the coating rubbed off, anything that looks like it's not supposed to be there. And then I try and fix it. So I try to professionally splice in a new wire where there's bare wires. Don't use electrical tape. Electrical tape only lasts so long and dirt gets under it, and then you're gonna have to do it again. Just do it right the first time. Go and get yourself a couple spools of wire, the right size, 14 to 16 gauge, depending on the vehicle, and some crimps and some shrink tubing. This is the best proper way for at-home mechanics to fix what they have without going to an actual professional mechanic. So what I like to do, I like to cut it. I like to put it 2 crimps on the factory wire and the shrink tubing. Oh, I forgot the shrink tubing first. Then you crimp it and then you heat it up, and that shrink tubing should keep it somewhat waterproof. The next thing I like to look for is those, basically anything spliced. I don't like spliced wires. I don't like when people go under the dash, they find a hot wire, they cut it, and then they attach a radio to it. I think that is pretty dangerous. It takes a draw from the fuse, or it takes a draw on the fuse, and it puts a draw on the fuse, which then you could burn out your fuse faster, or potentially your radio or whatever you have wired up to it, because it's not the right wire. If it was the right wire, it'd be already connected to the back of your radio or the, light or the, who knows what. It should be already connected. And if it's not connected, there's a designated wire under your dash somewhere for that thing. So anything that I see spliced, I always fix it. Yep, I do not splice wires, and if I do have to splice a wire, I make sure that the amps on the thing that I'm splicing in match the amps on my fuse panel. It's very important, because if your fuse blows, both objects that you're running off of that one fuse aren't going to work. Another big thing that a lot of people like to do, they like to go and get those crimp wire connectors. And any mechanic out there knows that these things suck. They're awful. Basically, it cuts a wire in half, and you have another wire attached to it, so you're not splicing in, but they are splicing in, but then they get corroded. They become a potential fire hazard because they can heat up. They're wrapped in plastic. They're just super dangerous. If you see those, remove all those and then fix the wires that are damaged, because more than likely that's going to be any of your electrical problems. So again, those climpy things, get rid of all of those. And before you even buy a vehicle, look at all this stuff. This is very important because you're going to have to fix it. So if it's too much work, maybe you can talk them down on some money, because you're going to have to fix all the wiring. Look at these certain areas. Let's see. Get extra fuses. Extra fuses, I think are important. They're really simple. They're really cheap. They're like $5. You can get maybe like $10 total to get a whole pack, and it'll give you like an assortment. Get the correct fuse assortment for your vehicle. Just throw it in your glove box. You never know when you're going to blow a fuse. Things get wet, it gets a little wonky, you may blow a fuse. And a lot of guys, they say, oh, well, we can just take the fuse out of my horn and put it in here. Okay, but now your horn's not working. And what else is attached to your horn? You don't know, because more than likely, if you're pulling fuses from different areas, you haven't looked at the wire schematics for that vehicle. So just get an extra fuse set for your truck. Just leave them in your glove box. They'll eventually save your life. And maybe not save your life, but at least make your life a little bit easier when it comes time to change your fuses. And then the last thing that I like to do before I even take it on the road, before you transport it back home and you start working on it, but after that, and you've made it street legal, quote unquote, street legal, check your lights. Hopefully all of your lights work. If not, change your bulbs. They're like $10 a box, maybe, if you're going with like LEDs. That's another thing we'll get to. Change your bulbs. You might as well front a little bit of money so you don't have to pay tickets in the end. A lot of cops, they'll see a 4x4 vehicle and they think, immediate thought, that thing's not street legal. So if you can follow the laws as much as possible right out the gate, maybe you can not draw as much attention to yourself. It's already hard because you're in a lifted vehicle and big tires, and it's probably dirty, but get your lights fixed, get them running well, so you don't have to worry about it. And do your inspection in the morning, or do your inspection before you go wheeling. I am an advocate for following the law because it saves me money in the long run. Sure, it stinks having to go put out maybe like, we'll say $200, $300 on a lot of this stuff, right, total. But it saves me from getting a $200 fine or a $300 fine or a $400 fine, and then me have to go spend the money to get this fixed. Just fix it right up front. And LED lights. LED lights. We talked about draw on fuses for a second. If you're going to change lights right off the bat, maybe your side markers are a little sun faded and they just look white. You can get LED side marker lights for, I think it's like a 2-box, orange for the front, red for the back. a pair in a box for like $14. One, they're super bright. Two, they last longer. And three, the fuses, the load on the fuse is way less. So I highly recommend swapping everything, especially in older vehicles, to LEDs. Headlights are a little more tricky. You have to add a resistor into it so the alternator doesn't make a weird flicker. Headlights are pretty expensive, so those halogens may just have to do for a while. Going into the maintenance thing, you've got everything, you're ready to go rock and roll. You've got your plan set that we talked about in the last episode, and you're out and about, you're having fun, and then you get back home. I know it is the coolest thing to drive around in the muddiest vehicle that anybody has seen. Okay? I used to do it all the time. I would just drive around with mud everywhere. Two things here. One, don't draw attention to yourself. Go get your car washed. If you're driving around in a muddy vehicle, the coppers are going to immediately think, what dirt road did this guy just go tear up? Now, if you're tearing up public roads, there's another fine for you. Go get your truck washed. The second thing is, dirt gets into everything. You just put a bunch of time and money into fixing the wiring, into changing all your parts out, your cap and rotor, your spark plugs, your spark plug wires. Go wash it. Go protect those parts for just a little bit longer than anticipated. Again, you're already putting a strain on a lot of those parts based on driving on two tracks, in water, in mud, through snow. You're already putting a lot of strain on that. Go and clean those parts so they last longer and your pocketbook isn't crying. The very last thing that I like to do, I forgot to mention this, the very last thing I like to do a big old deep clean of this vehicle. Older vehicles, they have rodents. It's inevitable. You are going to get rodents in your vehicle if it sits for too long, or if you find it in a field, or if it's anywhere in the country, you're gonna get rodents. Clean it out. Rodent poo is not good for you. I just came up with that. That was pretty good. Rodent poo is not good for you. So check everything. Check your headliner. Clean your carpets, clean your seat, wipe everything down. I know you want to go show all your buddies. Have them come over and help you. Get them into it so then you guys all can go wheeling. But get everything clean. This is your pride and joy 4x4 machine that you want it to look good on the road, but perform good and look good out in the wilderness. So there was a list of things that we just went and talked about. The next steps that I personally like to do before I even hit the trails or even driving around town. There may be other things, listen to your old man. He's more than likely a smart man and has been around the block a time or two. I did not do this, and I ended up getting myself into a lot of pickles when I should have just listened to my old man. I lost a drive line once, and I was like 45 miles away from home, and it was a very awkward conversation when my old man supplied my U-joints for me, and I didn't put them in because I was just too excited to go wheeling. Well, thank you for listening to me on the 4x4 Chronicles, episode 3, Next Steps. I hope to catch your ear on the next one. And if you'd like to watch this podcast, you can find it at 4x4 USA. And like always, God bless.